Welcome to Living Hope for Life. I'm your host, Michael Martelli. Thank you for tuning into our show. Living Hope for Life TV show is a pro-life TV ministry sponsored by Living Hope Church in Glen Burnie that works to connect with the local community to raise awareness, prevent abortion, and promote healing and forgiveness for those who have been scarred by abortion's effects. You can tune in Wednesday and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. on Anne Arundel County Community Television. That's Channel 99 on Comcast and Broadstripe, or Channel 39 on Verizon Fios. And you can always visit our website at www.livinghopeforlife.org to view all of our TV shows online, along with many other special video and audio features and tons of pro-life information and links to pro-life resources. We'll start today's show off with another news story. We like to start off each show with an important pro-life news story, and you can always see the latest news on our website homepage under Latest News, and you can now subscribe to our RSS feed to get up-to-the-minute information about pro-life legislation, upcoming events, and breaking news. This week's story is a combination of many stories and is very positive and encouraging. In the last few weeks, we have seen a tremendous increase in the amount of pro-life legislation being put forward all across the country. North Dakota, Nebraska, South Carolina, Arizona, Arkansas, and Kansas are joining Maryland by submitting various pro-life bills for consideration. These reports keep pouring in. I don't really know if this is truly an increase in legislation being put forward, but it certainly is getting much more attention. It feels like the pro-life movement is starting to move with urgency and focus. It almost feels like we are getting to the top of the mountain and we're just about to start rolling down the other side towards the end of abortion. Once we get rolling, there will be no stopping us because we have truth on our side. It makes me wonder, did the pro-abortion movement actually seal its own fate by getting the most pro-abortion president in the history of the United States elected? We'll move on to some email feedback from our website about our site and our show. We love to hear from the audience. We love to hear from you and from anyone who has an opportunity to check our website. Please visit the website at www.livinghopeforlife.org and tell us what you think about the site, about the TV show, and about our ministry. Tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, or what you think we can do to improve our success. Our first email this week comes from Bill in Baltimore. Bill says, "And can I say how nice it is to be working with not only a committed Christian, but a true professional organization." Another note this week from Cindy in Annapolis, speaking about mdpersonhood.com website that Living Hope for Life is actually sponsoring and maintaining. "This is wonderful. Thanks so much for all your support and encouragement. It's really great to hear all the kind words. We want to hear from you, so log on and tell us what you think, and tell us how we can improve." This week's guest is from Defend Life. He's actually the founder and creator of Defend Life and one of the true inspirational leaders in Maryland of the pro-life movement, Mr. Jack Ames. Jack, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, Mike.
Great. I want to start off the show like we have kind of established a tradition. I'm going to hand you one of our blue heart pins. It's a symbol for Living Hope for Life. Mm-hmm. So I want to give you that and wear it proudly. Jack, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been involved in the pro-life movement? Is there a single moment that you can remember getting involved that really sticks with you?
I think the pivotal moment that I became pro-life was way back in the summer of '61. I was in college, and I had the ethics book that I had bought, and I was going to be taking ethics at some point. And I didn't know what abortion was. Remember, this was almost half a century ago. And at that point, abortion was not a household word. And when I read in this ethics book what abortion was, I was horrified. So I think that's when I became actively pro-life. And then fast forwarding to about 1967, I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and different states were passing abortion bills where abortion was being permitted in certain so-called hard cases. Even the great Ronald Reagan signed a dastardly bill in California. He said he was sorry he had done it even before the ink was dry. So I started getting more and more interested, and then about 1971 or 72, I actually went to my first pro-life event. It was Dr. Jack Wilkie and his lovely wife Barbara, two of the founders of the pro-life movement from Cincinnati, Ohio, and they were speaking in Lynchburg, Virginia. So I went over to Lynchburg to hear these great people, and I was inspired. Another pivotal point was remember the day that Roe v. Wade came down from the Supreme Court was the same day that Lyndon Johnson, the former president, died. So it was sort of clouded by Lyndon Johnson's death. But that following summer, which would have been the summer of '73, I met a great lady by the name of Margie Montgomery from Kentucky, Lexington, actually Louisville, Kentucky. And Margie Montgomery was the founder of the pro-life movement in Kentucky. And she said, "What are you doing in Virginia? You have to get involved." So fast forwarding to January '74, the first March for Life, I said, we have to get a group from Richmond to go up there. So we had a busload. Well, it wasn't quite a busload. There was actually 13 of us.
Okay.
And we went up there, and we were thrilled. There was probably 5,000 people. Most of them had come from places like New York and Pennsylvania. And I was so pumped up that when we came back, just talking in the bus, what are we going to do now? Because that's when the work really starts. You can go to the March for Life, it's very inspirational. But what we do back here in Anne Arundel County, the Baltimore area, that's what really matters.
Right.
So there was an abortion mill there in Richmond. It was run by the Reverend Bluford, a Presbyterian minister. Now, he wasn't the abortionist, but he was the owner.
Wow.
And I thought, well, we obviously have to go out and we have to picket. We have to have signs at that abortion mill, which was not far from where I lived. So that was my real first pro-life activity, going to that first March for Life, and then starting some pro-life activism at the abortion mill there in North Richmond.
Great, great. Tell us about some of your heroes, some of your mentors, people that really influenced you. You mentioned a couple names. Is there anyone else that really got you going in the movement?
Oh, many people. Joe Scheidler was one of my great heroes then and still is this day. Somewhere about 1975, I was traveling in the Midwest. I was working for the train company. I'm a professional engineer, by the way. I do not work full-time in the pro-life movement. Just seems that way.
Yeah.
But I'm an engineer. I love engineering. I love what I do professionally. And I was working for the train company, TRANE, which was headquartered in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So I would go out there every summer to visit train, to get up to speed. And coming back, I came through Chicago. So I called Joe Scheidler, who I'd learned about through a publication. I was really enthralled by him. He had a pro-life action line. It was actually the Illinois Right to Life hotline. He put a new message on that every day. It was a wonderful, inspirational, upbeat message. And I thought, I have to meet this person. So I called ahead. Just said, oh, I'd love to spend a day with you. So I got to know Joe, and he's been my inspiration and the inspiration of thousands of people in the pro-life movement. Then we went back to Richmond. We started Richmond Right to Life. We became involved in Virginia Right to Life, and so forth. So Joe Scheidler, to this very day, continues to be one of my great heroes. He's the only person in the history of America who's had a Supreme Court case go to the court not once, not twice, but 3 times. Imagine. Wow. It was Now versus Scheidler. And what Now versus Scheidler was really about was, do pro-life activists, to citizens of America, have the right to be in front of abortion mills, to use their God-given powers to try to dissuade women from having abortions? And thankfully, the court finally ruled, yes, we did have that right. It was inherent in the First Amendment of the Constitution.
Wow. That's powerful. I mean, that Supreme Court 3 times. Wow. You didn't start in Maryland, as we found out. What brought you to Maryland? When did you come to Maryland, and what happened in Maryland in your pro-life, history and your experience here? Exactly.
So it was 1977, and I changed jobs. So I very reluctantly left Richmond because I was leaving Richmond Right to Life that I had started. I basically started the Right to Life movement, the pro-life movement in Richmond. I loved Richmond. Richmond's a great city. I loved Virginia. But I had a good job opportunity here in the Baltimore area, working for an energy management company. So I came up here and became involved in the pro-life movement. Well, there wasn't a lot going on, but they had one great annual conference in the Towson area. But the problem was, it was just a 1 or 2 day event. And then basically people packed it in, and nothing happened for the following year until they had the next conference. And I thought, that's not enough.
Right.
So that continually I dreamed about, I literally dreamed, we have to have more. And you have to be very careful what you dream about, because God is probably going to answer your dreams.
Yep.
And so what happened was, in 1987, and I had this dream that we wanted to get something started at Loyola College, because it's very important that the pro-life movement be involved on the college campuses, because those are the future leaders of our country. So believe it or not, in 1986, we started a pro-life group at the beautiful Cathedral of Mary Our Queen on North Charles Street in Baltimore. It was the Respect Life group. But then we had a chance to move it across the street to Loyola College. And that was 1987, so my dream really came true. And then for the next 10 years, we would bring in these great speakers about 6 times a year on a Friday night. Some of our great speakers were Bernard Nathanson. He was an abortionist. Notice I used the term abortionist. We don't call them doctors, they're abortionists. If somebody does plumbing, he's a plumber. If somebody does electrical work, he's an electrician. If somebody does abortions, he's an abortionist. And Bernard Nathanson had done 65,000 abortions, or participated in them in New York City. He was an atheist, he was Jewish, and he had a great testimony. A few years after that, he actually converted to Christianity. Wow. So he had a great conversion story. He was one of our outstanding speakers. We've had over 100 speakers, probably 500 different talks since 1987. Another great hero was Joan Andrews. Joan Andrews, whose name is Joan Andrews Bell, that's her married name, actually went into a Florida abortion mill and disarmed the suction machine, the instrument of death. And for that, she was sentenced to 5 years in a Florida penitentiary. Incredible. No proportionality at all. But when she was finally released, she went on a victory tour, and we had her at Loyola College. That was the first really big turnout we had. So that was a very important turning point in the history of Defend Life. We continue to have these great speakers there at Loyola through 1997. And then what happened is fewer and fewer people the speakers were better than ever, but a lot of people didn't want to come back into the city to hear those talks. So at that point, we took our Defend Life lecture program, as we call it, out to the churches. And that's what we do to this very day.
Great. So what was the original mission? When you started Defend Life, it was in 1987. What was your original mission? And I think you told me it changed some over the years. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Mike, the original mission was simply to get the pro-life message out on a continuing basis, as opposed to a one-shot-a-year basis. So we would have 6 different speakers, usually September, October, November, then we'd pick up in February, March, and April, usually on a Friday in the middle of the month. And then that worked very well, but God had more plans for us. So when we took it out to the churches, then we would have what we call lecture tours, and we would have the same speaker speak at 2 different churches, one church on Thursday night and one church on Friday night. And we do that to this very day. And then Friday during the day, typically we go to a couple of other churches in the morning and the early afternoon. Now, a few things that have changed is we've expanded our mission. Back in 2001, shortly after 9/11, we did our first Face the Truth tour. Now, it was Maryland Face the Truth tour. This summer we'll be doing our 9th Face the Truth tour. And what Face the Truth tours are is we use graphic images of aborted babies, primarily 2nd and 3rd trimester aborted babies. We go out to the highways and byways of Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, and we show those pictures. They're large pictures, 3 feet by 5 feet. We spread out 50 or 100 feet apart, and we show America what abortion really is. And why do we have to do that? Because there's a blackout, there's a media blackout on what abortion really is. There's also an academia blackout. Have you ever seen a picture of an aborted baby in the Baltimore Sun or the Washington Post?
No.
Or on ABC, CBS, or NBC? No, that's because there's an official, maybe it's unofficial, but it's real, blackout. Judy Brown, I hope you have Judy Brown of the American Life League here someday in the near future. But what she tried to do is she tried to run an ad in USA Today. That was probably a $25,000 full-page ad. Guess what? USA Today refused to take that ad. So there really is a blackout. Another example would be when 18 of us were arrested the last day of last year's Maryland Face the Truth tour. 18 of us were arrested. Now you would think that would be big news, wouldn't you? A lot of them were teenagers, more than half. But no, it was blacked out by the media. Not one major newspaper carried it. Not the Baltimore Sun, not the Washington Post, not even the Washington Times. We even tried to run an ad in the Catholic Review when it was becoming obvious that we're being blacked out. A picture of the arrest. You know what? They pulled the ad. So that's why we have to go out and show the pictures of aborted babies, because it's the only real way we have of getting out the horrible reality of what abortion is.
Yeah, it's really sad that I know exactly what you're talking about, the media coverage. Just in January was the National March for Life in D.C. I know I was down there with you. We were passing out cards about the Maryland Personhood Amendment, and I came home and didn't see it on one single news station. Not even a story about how many, 250,000 people that were down in D.C. 2 days after the president's inauguration, and not a single news story about it. And that wasn't even graphic images of abortion.
I totally agree.
It's even bigger than just the images. It's really a media blackout, and that is one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing. And we're so honored to have you here and other speakers and leaders like you. We have a place to get this word out, and we're doing it on television, but we're doing it on the internet, and we're giving people an opportunity to see these shows and help educate people. So I'm glad you're here. Tell us some of the other. You mentioned some of the first really big turnouts, but what are some of the other memorable speakers you've had on your Defend Life lecture tours?
There was Janet Jessen. Janet Jessen was actually aborted, but she survived the abortion, and that was the single largest turnout we've ever had. We had about 500 people. That was a wonderful turnout. That was at Loyola College. I already mentioned Bernard Nathanson, who had a huge turnout. We had people like Congressman Bob Dornan. We had Congressman Chris Smith, who grew up in the pro-life movement, one of our great pro-life heroes, Chris Smith from the state of New Jersey. We've had Joe Scheidler any number of times. Mike Schwartz, another great hero of the pro-life movement. Just recently we had people like, this coming week we're going to have Paul Schenck, another great hero of the pro-life movement. You have to have Paul on very soon, the founder of the National Pro-Life Action Center in Capitol Hill and National Pro-Life Radio. We're going to be having Monsignor Stuart Swetland in March talking about exactly what happened last November and how we can reverse that. By the way, Paul Schenck will be talking about how new Democrats and new Republicans will reverse Roe versus Wade.
Wow. Yeah, I think I'll be attending that. I can't wait to see that, and I would love to invite Paul to be on the show. That's great. So help me understand GAP.
Sure.
I don't know what GAP is, but tell us a little bit about GAP and what that stands for and what the mission is of that organization.
Sure. Let me just mention one thing about our Face the Truth tours.
Sure.
They really have an impact because people, many people, believe it or not, do not know what abortion is. So we're uncovering the reality of what abortion is, uncovering the secret of abortion. And we've had so many stories where women see the pictures and their hearts and their minds are changed because they really didn't know what an aborted baby looked like. Well, GAP is the same thing. GAP stands for Genocidal Awareness Project. There was a wonderful man by the name of Greg Cunningham who grew up in Pennsylvania, State College, Pennsylvania, but he later relocated to Southern California. And he started the Center for Bioethical Reform. And he was one of the pioneers in using the images. So GAP is like the college campus version of Face the Truth, where you have these large banners depicting abortion and other related events, other related holocausts like the German Nazi Holocaust. And we set those up either on college campuses, usually state-funded colleges, because the First Amendment enables us to go out there without any permission and set them up. First Amendment's wonderful. And we can also go to parks and set them up. So anyways, it's more of a stationary display. It's more of like an art exhibit where people can come up and look at these banners, engage us in conversation. The day after the March for Life, January 23rd, we had a GAP at Farragut Square, which is about 3 blocks from the White House. And there was one person who didn't like it, and he decided to try to knock over one of our banners. He was a jogger. So not everybody likes what we're doing, but we can be sure of one thing. If somebody's trying to knock over a banner, chances are they've been touched by abortion. Keep this in mind. 1 out of Actually, 45% of all women of childbearing age have had at least one abortion. Isn't that staggering? So that also means that 45% of women of childbearing age have had one abortion. How about the men? There's lots of men involved in those abortions. Many parents are involved in abortion because they force their daughter, their pregnant young daughter, to have an abortion. So yes, we really stir up the conscience of America. Here was another example of what happened at one of our gaps. There was a man there, he was probably about 35 years old, and he was just glued to one of our banners. Mm-hmm. And I saw him get on his cell phone, and I overheard what he said. He called up a friend, and he said, "Where are you? You have to get over here to 17th and K. You won't believe what I'm looking at." And it turned out this man was an international lawyer with 2 law degrees. He was not a dummy. But that's one example of just how effective the media blackout has been. That's why we have to continue to do things like GAP, Genocidal Awareness Project, and Face the Truth tours.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is amazing. So you also sponsor pro-life apologetics training. I think there's one coming up as well with a true inspiration of mine, Scott Klusendorf. Tell us a little bit about what these classes and courses are.
Sure, Scott Klusendorf, and he has a wonderful website, prolifetraining.com. And by the way, it was Greg Cunningham, who we just mentioned, who brought Scott Klusendorf into the pro-life movement. Scott at that point was a youth pastor in Southern California, and Greg Cunningham was going out and talking to youth pastors. This particular night, there was only 2 youth pastors who showed up. And a lot of people would have packed it in, so, let's go someplace when we'll talk over some coffee or something like that. But Greg Cunningham, God bless him, gave his full spiel, and Scott Klusendorf was totally enthralled, totally inspired. And then he went on to teach pro-life apologetics. A few years ago, he relocated from Southern California to Atlanta and started his own group, prolifetraining.com. So on April the 19th, Saturday, we'll have him here in the Baltimore, Washington area. It'll be a one-day, all-day seminar starting at 9 and going to 3. The night before, we'll have him at a church up in Bel Air, Maryland. We're still looking for a church to have him on Sunday, the day after the Pro-Life 101. But he's wonderful, and he has these great arguments like SLED. SLED, S stands for size. The fact that I'm a little taller than you doesn't mean I'm more human, does it?
No.
L stands for level of development. He has great examples. Level of development has no impact on whether you're human or not. Sure. E, environment, stands for where we are doesn't determine who we are. If Mike's in a closet, he's no less human. If a baby, the preborn baby, is inside his or her mother's womb, they are no less human, are they? So where we are doesn't determine who we are. So that's E. So we have S, L, E. D stands for degree of dependency. So now we have the whole sled. And a person who's on dialysis, although they're dependent on that for their life, they're just as human as you and I who are not on dialysis. So Scott Klusendorf has these wonderful arguments that make us better able to articulate the pro-life message.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Jack, we're running out of time here. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I really appreciate you coming. You've been an inspiration to me as well.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait to come to some of the training and seminars that are coming up, and we will continue to publicize the events that are going on for the lecture tours and the truth tours and the training stuff. So thank you for being on our show, and we look forward to having you on our show again in the future.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
Sure. So we'll wrap up today's show. Mention of some of our upcoming guests. Next time we will be having Eric Whittington, the director and founder of Rock for Life. Gina Cook, who actually gave a presentation at the Fall 40 Days for Life Midpoint Rally. That presentation is on our website, on the TV show's webpage, but she's going to join us in person and elaborate on Asher's story. And if everything works out well, I think we'll actually be taping on Asher's 9th birthday. So that's going to be a treat. Mr. Steve Peruka, as Jack mentioned, Mr. Paul Schenk, Mr. Peruka was involved with the National Pro-Life Action Center and National Pro-Life Radio. Pam Palumbo from the Bowie Crofton Severna Park Pregnancy Clinic, the director, will be with us. And Denise Douglas, Baltimore representative for Project Rachel, the sponsors retreats and post-abortion support for women. In addition, don't forget 40 Days for Life starting on February 25th, which is Ash Wednesday, and goes through Palm Sunday, which is April 5th, the Sunday before Easter. And the Maryland March for Life, please join us in Annapolis on Monday, March 9th. Archbishop O'Brien from the Baltimore Archdiocese will be celebrating Mass at 5 o'clock at St. Mary's. There'll be a non-denominational service in the cafeteria at St. Mary's as well. David B. Wright from 40 Days for Life will be joining us. Tracy Tiernan from WRBS will be joining us, and many, many other pro-life leaders and supporters. I'm sure Jack will be joining us. And once again, I'd like to encourage you to visit our website at www.livinghopeforlife.org. Give us some feedback. All our shows are available online. But give us some comments on the TV shows, on our ministry. You might have your comment read online on the air. So please sign up for our newsletter and support Living Hope for Life. Thank you very much for joining us once again. And we look forward to seeing you on our next show of Living Hope for Life.